problems. Yeah. Perfect. Cool. Hey everyone, nice to meet you. My name is Brendan Hann. I'm here with Now Secure, and I'm here to talk about the OWASP MASVS. I'll start with just a very little bit about me and about Now Secure, kind of paint a picture for you. Why am I here? Why am I giving this talk? My name is Brendan Hann. I've been with Now Secure for a year and a half, but I've been in application security testing for more than 5 years. I always like to say I'm a security enthusiast with a passion for development velocity, but I feel like you kind of have to say that if you work in cybersecurity right now. And Now Secure is the mobile AppSec testing expert. We've been doing mobile application security testing for 12 years. We are heavily involved with OWASP, so thank you again for having us. We do testing, training, and we support a lot of open source like Frida and Radare. So I'll give you kind of a closer look at that OWASP partnership that I mentioned. So we are the mobile project community contributors. So we have one of the project leads, Carlos, on staff as a researcher at Now Secure. He's spectacular. We earned the title of God Mode sponsor this year for the long-term financial support that we gave the mobile project. We've the first and only mobile advocate, and our founder, Andrew Hogue, is involved with Cyclone DX, which we'll talk about a little bit later. But we work really closely with the OWASP organization. The work that everyone here is doing is really important and really exciting. So excited to partner with you guys. We also have a couple of other kind of partnerships in the market with standards bodies, IOXT, which is an IoT connected device testing standard, and we're an ADA authorized lab for the new Google Play data safety requirements. So we're all over the place, but we do the most with OWASP. And then open source, like I said, we support both Frida and Radare. The creators, Pancake and Ula, are both Now Secure researchers. These are two mobile app security testing tools that most security analysts will be familiar with, but that's our open source work. And I'll give you a 10-second, this is what we do. I mentioned that we do automated testing with platform. We do manual testing with Workstation. We pen test as a service. And we also have the Now Secure Mobileverse, which is new and the world's first mobile AppSec community. So that paired with our free online academy, we do everything. We're the mobile experts. That's why we're here to talk to you today. And we've been doing this for a long time. And we've learned that securing mobile apps is hard. It's simple, but it's true. Doing mobile app security testing is really difficult. And part of the reason why is because it's leading the way in innovation in a number of ways. Your mobile apps and your mobile devices have access to more data than most devices, including live GPS, cameras, health sensors, everything of the like, right? So when we talk to our customers that are innovating in the space, when we talk to our prospects that are innovating in the space, kind of the question that we always like to ask is, what's the biggest challenge? What's the frustration that you would love to see solved when you're developing these innovative mobile apps? And far and away, the most common answer is unpredictable security release blockers. No one wants to get stopped at that finish line. And what we've realized is that there's a ton of different things that can block your next release, whether it's app store requirements, internal security testing, or governance requirements. There are feature delays, bug fix delays. Sometimes it's everything. But what we've noticed is that this problem is super pervasive, which is the reason why we're so excited to come and talk about the MASVS. These are some horrifying stats. Just there's going to be a couple of those sprinkled in. as we kind of adopt more mobile and more kind of more mobile lifestyles, a lot of our traffic is going in that direction. So 69% of your traffic is on mobile versus web, and there was 200 billion mobile app downloads in 2021. But through our analysis, 85% of the app stores have security risks that fail the OWASP Mobile Top 10, and 70% leak personal data that would violate GDPR or CCPA. So, like I said, this is hard. I'm going to take a second. I don't know how to, well, if you're online, feel free to throw it in the chat, but if you're in the room, raise your hand if any of these phones or any of these apps are on your phone right now. If you've used them recently, usually that happens. Yep, most everyone. So this is a really pervasive problem. There have been known security breaches for everything in that yellow box within the past 12 months. It might be 18 months at this point, but it's still true. You'll notice that there are some really common ones in there, like iMessage and the Mail app. But anyway, this is really just to demonstrate, like, this is a super pervasive problem and a real challenge in the market. If you're interested in the data and the links that I just shared, we have a mobile risk tracker that you can look at for free. It's online. There's a link there. And we also have a breach tracker, so you can keep track of if the apps you use every day are secure or not. If we think about the crux of mobile app security, it's really about sensitive data. Like I mentioned, all of those all of those pieces of data that your device has access to. And one of the things that we really are excited about that happened a long time ago was when the OWASP Mobile Project was founded. And it was a recognition of, hey, web and mobile are really fundamentally different. And, where in the web world, you have, perimeters and layered protection. Mobile is much more in the wild. It's much harder to protect yourself from things like reverse engineering attacks. You have different OSs to worry about, languages to worry about, frameworks to worry about. It's a little bit more complex. And again, the sensitivity of the data that you have is really terrifying. But the good news is the MASVS is here to help. Like I mentioned, the OWASP Top 10 exists for both web and mobile, which is a great recognition. But it really boils down to the difference in attack surface, right? So if we think about the challenge with securing mobile apps, you have to worry about a lot of different attack vectors and a lot of different kinds of attack surfaces. So you not only have to worry about the potential for app level attacks, you also have to worry about hardware-based attacks, network and cloud service attacks, and data center backend attacks. And this is just kind of a super simplified picture, right? You can go way deep on the apps, you can go way deep on the hardware, but these are all the pieces of the attack surface, right? So you can think about the code or the architecture, the data as it's in use or in rest, and the API backends that exist in your mobile app. I'm not going to read all of these, but this is just kind of a selection of kind of the most critical to secure. The cool thing that we're going to get to in a second is the OWASP MASVS actually maps pretty closely to this attack surface. So whether you're focusing on app code, data at rest, data in motion, or the API backend, there's a piece of the MASVS that really helps you focus on one of these areas. So this is really quick sidebar. MITRE is the only other organization that's kind of gone above and beyond to recognize the difference between securing the app on the device versus data and network versus the backend system. But we're here to talk about the MASVS. And there's all sorts of spectacular resources from OWASP that exist that are publicly available, like the MASVS, like the MSTG, that have both been updated within the past year. The MASVS is going through a refactoring that we'll talk about a little bit later. But they also have updated the mobile security testing checklist this year, which was something that they had previously retired. So we're excited to see that come back as a more tactical guide to kind of guide your testing. But we're going to take a sec to really talk about the MASVS. So the MASVS breaks down into kind of 4 different levels. And the first level is kind of the minimum bar, right? So this is kind of the standard security level for apps that require no compliance or regulatory checks. Simple apps. A good example for this would be like a healthcare WebMD app. The reason why is because that's essentially just a catalog of information, right? You go in there, you search, it searches your search terms, and it provides you with results. So there's not any really sensitive data there. There's no compliance checks required. But as you get into more regulated industry data, as you have to consider compliance, or as you have like apps that perform more simple tasks but have really sensitive data in them, you move from L1 to L2. And a good example of an L2 app is a healthcare like weight monitoring app. If you imagine plugging in your name and your birth date and your weight, all of those become kind of regulated data, and you need to consider those pieces of data when you are securing your app. So that's a good example of an L2 app. And then the other side of this matrix adds this idea of plus R, which is reverse engineering resilience. And this is when you really want to prioritize IP protection or prevent malicious modification or tampering. A really good example that's we've talked about a lot is a medical formulary app, meaning like the app that CVS would use to get the recipe for the drugs that they put together. And the reason why is because it would be absolutely terrible if someone were to reverse engineer that app and then modify the code in a way that changes that formula. Super dangerous, but it doesn't necessarily have super sensitive customer information. It just has the recipes, right? The highest level, of course, becomes L2 plus R, which is that defense in depth with reverse engineering resiliency. This is something that does really complex activities between users, handles highly sensitive information. You have compliance, you have IP to protect, and you also need to prevent malware-based attacks. So healthcare delivery, drug delivery app, like an app that Medtronic produces, is a really good example of this. Kind of taking a second, the app itself is one that's used for diabetes, and it produces or it releases insulin, and the potential attacks are life-threatening. So that's an app that absolutely has to meet that L2 plus R kind of standard. So those are the 4 levels of the MASVS. We have them annotated here. We'll send out these slides at the end so you can kind of see. But again, the L1 is kind of standard best practices. L2 is when you get into defense in depth. You get MFA, you get cert pinning, you need to harden against any lost device scenarios. And then R2 is when you add hardening. So that's when you start to add in obfuscation or anti-tampering measures. But it's important to say that this adding just R isn't enough. It's not meant to compensate for poor security, because reverse engineering resiliency is great. It's resilient and it helps with obscuring your source code, but it doesn't solve for the underlying issues. But we'll talk more about that as we get into this later. But circling back on the mobile attack surface, right? What's really nice and what we really are excited about is the fact that OWASP has a standard that covers just about every piece of the mobile attack surface. For app code, you have both the MASVS code and the MASVS resiliency. Architecture is architecture, of course. And then when you're looking at data and rest, you can look at the cryptography or the storage measurements that are suggested in the MASVS. platform for data in use, and authorization and network for data in motion. The only one that's not included in the MASVS directly is the API top 10 for the API backends. But it's encouraging for us, and it's encouraging for the space that OWASP as an organization has recognized kind of the need to secure each piece of this attack surface. So that was a little bit of a preview, but these are the 8 domains of the MASVS. So we talked about the 4 quadrants of the MASVS with L1, L2, and L1 and 2 plus R. But these are the 8 domains. You have architecture, data and storage, cryptography, authentication, network communication, environmental interaction, code quality, and then that reverse engineering resiliency. So V8 is the same as plus R, just to kind of make that easier. But in our help, or in our consulting and testing of apps, we found that there's 5 kind of key areas that you can focus on to really make a big dent in mobile apps security. And these are those top 5 areas. So before we get into it, just quick sidebar, this discussion is based on 5 years of benchmark analysis of thousands of mobile apps. We run 600 automated tests that include static, dynamic, IS, and API security testing on each one of those apps. We map those findings to the MASVS and MSTG with CVSS scored risks. And we then make all of that data publicly available through the mobile risk tracker, which there was a link earlier in the slide for, that shows it by industry vertical. So you can access all of the data that we kind of base these top 5 recommendations on through our website. So yeah, publicly available. All right, so the first domain to focus on, the number 1 kind of thing that you can make a really big positive impact on is insecure data storage and crypto. This is far and away the most frequent vulnerability type that we find when we're testing mobile apps. 50% of mobile apps have insecure data storage. So again, really prevalent problem. It maps directly to V2 and V3 of the MASVS. And before I go much further, I'm going to engage everyone again with a hand raise question. Can you raise your hand for me if you're on the security side of the house, tester, that kind of person? Awesome. And then dev side of the house. All right. Okay. A lot of you didn't raise your hands. Awesome. Thank you for joining anyway. Well, what we're going to do is we're going to talk about each of these bugs. We'll talk about kind of what it means as an attack, what it can do to impact your business, and then how to test for it and how to write better secure code to start with. So with insecure data storage, what that really means is there's access to systems that aren't necessarily controlled, which means malware or a lost or stolen device or a malicious USB charger can cause some really serious damage, not only to your reputation, but also can lead to identity theft, fraud. It's a compliance violation for many compliance requirements, and ultimately data exfiltration can come from insecure data and cryptography. So when you are coding or when you're writing your apps, best recommendations include avoiding writing sensitive to the data to the device at all. That's something that is avoidable. And if you have to write it to the device, absolutely encrypt it. Avoiding query strings in the sensitive data itself and implementing security data storage is both really good pieces of advice. Use the strongest current cryptography requirements or things that are available. I think it's SHA-3 still, but there's also secure random, and then using longer keys is always better. So using a 2048-bit or a 4096-bit key both help kind of, from a coding standpoint, help solve this challenge. When you're testing those apps to make sure that those requirements are met, test for credentials in files and logs that are stored on the device. Make sure that data is removed from the background. This is something that we've actually seen an uptick in as a consumer. If you've noticed, when you swipe up from a lot of apps, like if you look at your I don't know what the screen is called, I probably should. Like when you're multitasking on your iPhone, you can see all of your apps. Now, most of them are grayed out instead of just being able to see all of the data on there. So that's happening more, which is exciting. Testing the cryptography libraries and the storage, confirm that it requires the device password for use, and check any other weak crypto and bad practices. So that's going to be the pattern. Insecure network communication is the second thing to focus on. This is in 40% of mobile apps. So 50% had cryptography challenges, 48% have network challenges. This is V5 for those keeping track of the MASVS. And what this really means is your network communications that your app makes are unprotected, whether that's using HTTP instead of HTTPS or not validating your TLS. That means malicious VPNs, exploited networks, public Wi-Fi, something just called internet, may be an attack vector. The business impact there includes identity theft, fraud, reputational risk, can be data exfiltration as well. But the best practices for coding this are including, so make sure you generate your TLS sessions after a successful DNS validation. You should be performing certificate pinning for connections that are carrying regulated data. iOS and Android both have built-in features to help protect against this. iOS is called App Transport Security, and Android it's called Network Security Configuration. Use those. The other thing that you can do is learn how to prevent man-in-the-middle attacks. That's kind of the headline that network calls or improperly coded network calls often falls under. When you're testing that app, test the TLS, cert pinning, zip files in transit. Look for the use of the ATS and NSC. Those are both built-in operating system features. And then check third-party libraries. This is something that we've seen kind of become more and more important. More and more people are talking about. I'll talk a little bit more about it later. But third-party libraries and dependencies and transitive dependencies can often lead to pieces of data being improperly transmitted over insecure networks. So the third thing that you can do is insecure authentication or authorization. You should be working on solving this. I have good news for you, though. I've said terrible stats this whole time. Only 14% of the mobile apps that we use every day have insecure authentication. So it's a better stat. It's not an awesome stat, but it's a better stat than the 48 and the 50 that we saw earlier. So what this means really is the authentication scheme, like a weak password is accepted, or there's a design flaw in session management, so you can elevate your privilege level, or the session holds for too long. That means via APIs or a stolen device, there may be opportunity to brute force or get access when the user isn't authorized to, which leads to reputational risk, theft, all of the terrible things that happens when someone is getting access that shouldn't. When coding, terminate the active session after a given amount of time. That's standard best practice. Make sure no app is visible when a session is invalidated. Discard and clear the memory associated with user data and encryption, and then run authorization checks and permissions for authenticated users on the server side, not the client side. Test for session validation and data in memory. Data in memory is one that we see more often than you would expect. So from a testing perspective, look at those kinds of things. The fourth is just generally insecure coding practices. 47% of apps have exploitable extraneous functionality. This is from things that are like logic flaws or a vulnerable third-party library. You have overflows, memory leaks, or an unnecessary component built into the app itself. Attack vector, you can have malware, phishing, unsuspected users, extraneous functionality feature, and this can lead to data theft, reputational risk, fraud, unauthorized access. I have a funny story about this. I won't say names, but we know of a company that we've worked with that had built in their coupon generation into their app, which is almost a good idea, unless you are, selling something that's expensive and someone reverse engineers your app and finds that coupon generation code and just generates something that's 100% off and it's valid by the app, so they allow the transaction to go through. So don't do that. From a best practices standpoint, remove debug symbols from your code when you're building it. Ensure the secure coding best practices are employed. There are free security features offered in the tool chain like stack protection and ARC, and then keep track of your third-party dependencies with a software bill of materials. Those can also be used to scan for well-known vulnerabilities through an SCA light tool, but that's kind of the keys when you're writing your app. When you're testing that app, test the app with a valid certification, test for debug build and hard-coded keys, look for error conditions and really verbose log files, and then again, check those third-party libraries through a software bill of materials. It's really important, and supply chain attacks is kind of the talk of the town right now. So be sure to inspect the third-party libraries that your mobile app uses in the same way that you would a web app. And then the fifth thing, I said there were 5, this is the 5th one, is that +R that we talked about earlier. So 32% of mobile apps available on the market today are exposed to reverse engineering. This is V8, like I said, it's also the +R in that matrix that we talked about earlier. This means that, the IP of that app is unprotected, and the binary itself can be reversed pretty easily in order to exploit it in a number of ways, including data theft, IP theft, reputational risk, fraud, unauthorized access. We see a lot of cloning of apps. So these apps that are really publicly available and not reverse engineering resilient, we'll see a very similar, if not the same app come out from another producer. So this is, something that's really interesting from our perspective at NowSecure, because we test for security, and one of the things that we do as testers is reverse engineer an app. And that includes using some of the open source tools that I talked about our support of, like Frida and Radare. And the fact that this many are out in the wild without reverse engineering resilience is something that we've noticed. There are third-party obfuscation tools, especially for Android apps, that you can use. Android also has the SafetyNet API that you can use to check for any Android device tampering. There are other anti-tampering techniques that you can absolutely employ. And then when you're testing for it, you need to check for reversibility with root debugger, data file manipulation, and test your string tables and methods. And then again, check for that SafetyNet API. So from an iOS standpoint, you can look for jailbreaks. And then from an Android standpoint, you can look for the SafetyNet API. But I'm going to say again that resilience is great, and it's absolutely in the top 5 things that you can do to make your mobile app more secure, but it doesn't fix security bugs or protect security bugs in the production code. So it helps, but it doesn't solve the problem. So some key takeaways. Web and mobile are different. The tools that you use to test those should be different. The findings will be different. The attack surface is different. They're very different. We're here at the OWASP talk. Get to know the OWASP Mobile Project. There's a ton of fantastic resources. They just launched a new website for the mobile project itself, so it's really exciting. And there's all sorts of refactoring going on that I'm still going to talk about. There are a ton of great resources that you can leverage to build your skills and build a toolkit if testing mobile apps is something that's interesting to you. Threat modeling is something that we've seen really successful customers employ across their mobile app portfolio. And there are 8 requirements that help break down the problem. Those are those 8 domains of the MASVS that I talked about. But we recommend starting with the big 5 that I mentioned and that I talked about a little bit more in depth, including storage, network, authentication, code and reverse engineering, resiliency, and then get involved in the OWASP Mobile Project. There's plenty of fantastic folks probably in this room that are contributors to OWASP and the mobile project. This is just a call to action to go sign up because it's great resources. The refactoring is something that is ongoing, so it's exciting to be able to talk about right now. So right now, the MASVS is going through a massive refactoring update where each one of the domains that we talked about today is being investigated and opened up for comment. Everything in blue is finalized, meaning the V2 of network through architecture has been finalized and published, and MASVS resiliency actually closed for comment on the 3rd, I think, of September. It might be the 2nd or 3rd. Early September it closed. But for updates on the project, the OWASP Mobile Project has started a GitHub account where you can see all of the updates. The link is here, so you can absolutely learn more there. In terms of delivery of the new MASVS V2, we're expecting that to come by the end of this year, the end of this calendar year. So the last thing to do is publish the new version of resiliency, and that'll be that. I recognized after putting these slides together that putting a QR code in front of a bunch of security conscious people is probably not going to land. So I put the link at the bottom as well. There's tons that you can do to help with the MASVS, whether it's really simple like fix typos or answer discussion questions. Carlos is looking for someone to help design the swag. And try out the new tools themselves. Anyone can help. It's really a fun project to be a part of. And yeah, you don't have to scan the QR code. I should probably just take that off. I don't think you're gonna put a QR code up. It'd be bold. It would be bold. I don't know if I would scan a QR code. The other thing that I wanted to kind of just raise awareness on and talk about is the iOS and Android security and privacy updates. With the newest version of iOS, the new Apple privacy section has been launched. So there's more information available to the developer and to the user. And Android actually started this before Apple did. With the data safety section in their app store that became mandatory in the middle of this year. So as you are releasing Android apps, updating old ones or releasing new ones, you're required to fill out the data safety section. And if you wanted to go an extra mile, you can get an independent security review that's based on the OWASP MASVS and MSTG, actually. So the App Defense Alliance worked with a bunch of vendors to identify kind of the best practices. OWASP MASVS was so good that they settled on a section of that. This is that section. And they built their own kind of standard called the Mobile Application Security Assessment, also known as MASA. And it's a published formal set of requirements based on the MSVS and MSTG. So wanted to raise that to everyone's attention because it's OWASP related and probably impacts anyone with an Android app. Quick sidebar, Now Secure worked with ADA to build the requirement, and we're an authorized lab. So if you wanted that independent security review, we can help. Other OWASP initiatives that Now Secure is involved with includes Cyclone DX. This is something that's for software bill of materials specifically. There has been a whirlwind of activity in the public sector around software supply chain security and understanding the components, the dependencies, transitive dependencies, and otherwise of your applications at large, including mobile apps. There's a couple of different executive orders. There were a ton of OMBs, OMB memos. There's FISMA Reform Act, the NSTAC Act report. There's tons. If you wanted to dive into this, you can, but I'm only saying all of this to help set the stage for OWASP Cyclone DX. It's a new flagship project at OWASP. It's the industry standard for SBOM interoperability. It's a long word to say when you've been talking for this long. It's all about being able to talk to each other. And it's chaired by Steve Springett and Patrick Dwyer. It cross-links with the OWASP MASVS project as well. And OWASP also has the dependency track tool that you can use to discover those or to build that SBOM. Now Secure contributes to the Cyclone DX project, and we also provide free mobile SBOMs. You can get 10 of them if you'd like, for 10 mobile apps, so you can gain that visibility into the components that you have. There are tons of resources, like I said. Here's kind of our suggestion on a mobile pen tester's toolkit. So there's a ton of open source testing resources like the MASVS, MSTG. There's the hacking playground that the MSTG came out with. Frida and Radare are both really powerful tools that our testers use. Burp Suite, the Z-Attack proxy or ZAP. Getting jailed and rooted devices can be a little bit of a challenge, but those are kind of the requirements. There are automated testing resources as well. Now Secure can give you a free mobile SBOM, a free report. We have free online training with Academy. We have a toolkit that you can get, and that platform automation, like I mentioned. Some interesting free training options. I tried not to plug, but these ones I think are really worth it. Now Secure has released Now Secure Academy. It's online courseware that includes mobile app security testing and mobile app development best practices. It's all free, so I don't feel bad recommending it. It really is free. You can go in there, you can take as many courses as you'd like. We upsell certification if you want it, but that's totally optional. So there's online courseware that you can take advantage of. The other thing that we have is Now Secure Connect, and that's just around the corner. That is kind of the industry leading mobile app security industry event. So we have a whole bunch of industry speakers coming, and really excited about sharing that with you all. You can check out your own mobile apps with these tools. Because we're sending these slides out, there are links there if you wanted to get a free SBOM, free security report of any of the apps that you use or build. You can absolutely do that. And yeah, we have a full kind of suite of solutions if you're looking for automated testing, supply chain analysis, a toolkit, learning, pen testing as a service, or if you want to join kind of the world's only mobile community, the Now Secure Mobileverse is there for you. We also have guides to learn more on our website. And the other thing that I always like to plug is the Crack Me from R2Com. That's just super fun to play with.
So this set, we have it on the OWASP site, you can do lots of helpful ways in it. If we don't provide a mailing list, we mail it.
Oh, I was assuming that I could give you guys the slides and you would send them, but whatever works. Yes, absolutely.
And the recording will be
Yeah, the recording is online, so we'll get that up in YouTube, and I'll put a link to all the presentation in there. Any questions here for Brendan? I didn't see any questions online short of what we just asked is when the presentation's available.
Gotcha.
So,
I saw the chat, but didn't want to pull it up on the screen. So appreciate that.
Yeah, I had a quick question for you, if I may. Vern Williams here. One of the concerns about mobile devices is the number of input sources. You know, you've got about a dozen different ways, you know, 2 different GPS types of input, and all the rest. So do you have a threat model of typical mobile device that's been done?
Yeah, so that's a super interesting question. We don't have a publicly available threat model that you can check out, but I think that's a really interesting suggestion for sure. Yeah, so I think what I would point to is actually probably the MASVS. They do a really good job of enumerating kind of the attack surface to check out.
Okay.
But yeah, that's a really interesting suggestion.
Thank you.
Yeah, I had a quick question about, so when you have end users in a corporate environment that don't have corporate managed devices.
Yep.
Do you have any stats to talk about, you know, when you look at these headlines, and I know that social engineering is absolutely going to probably start with your phone, but what about actual exploits into corporate infrastructure that started from your phone? Like, is there any stats on that? Like,
Yeah. So yes, we have, as a security organization, we have to be really careful about what we disclose publicly, because a lot of the times we do responsible disclosures with the organizations that we find really vulnerable or really high impact vulnerabilities with. But what you can look at for those stats is the mobile risk tracker, publicly available, super free. And it actually shows the top 5 vulnerabilities in the industry that you're looking at. And you can look at like the gig economy versus social media versus healthcare versus finance. And we look at the top apps in each of those categories, top 5 vulnerabilities, and share like some percentages around. We shared some of the data around what you're asking. So yeah, that's publicly available at our mobile risk tracker.
One more quick question, if I may. The rental cars, you know, allow you to sync your device with the car, and then when you get the next person rents it, they get to see your entry there. Is there any like watering hole kinds of attacks that are based around car mobile connectivity?
That's a really interesting question as well. Thank you. Not that I've heard of. I'm sure someone has tried. The good news is typically in those rental cars, if I'm thinking of the right thing, they get really limited access to your data. So it'll be like some of your contacts, maybe some of the calls that you made in the car. Hopefully that's all you're giving it access to.
Yeah.
But
I was thinking more like mobile malware, that when you plug your phone in or connect via wireless, that taken advantage of.
Yeah, okay. I better understand your question. What's really interesting is most of the car heads-up displays are built on mobile-like operating systems. Now Secure has actually been working closely with a lot of those manufacturers to better understand what vulnerabilities they have in their OS that would enable that kind of attack. There hasn't been anything that's come out in terms of news breach or vulnerability responsible disclosure or anything like that in the realm of what you're talking about. But now Secure is actively partnering with many of the car manufacturers and software manufacturers that partner with the cars in order to better understand that threat landscape. So yeah, super interesting question. No incidents that I'm aware of in which that kind of attack has happened, but yeah, super interesting.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Malware like ransomware, don't hear of it much. Ransomware.
So the question for anyone online, is there mobile ransomware? The answer is yes. There was an article that came out last week about a massive amount of malware that was found on the Android Google Play Store. The good news is that the Apple and Google are both actively trying to solve this inside of their app stores, both with those data safety sections and with the independent security review. But there's a remarkable amount of malware on app stores that you wouldn't necessarily expect to be there. I can find the article for you and show you after, but
I was just wondering what pictures and this came from. Wouldn't it be interesting to have a malware that helped them to rate? I'm not.
No, I'm with you. Yeah. But yes, super interesting. It is something that we've seen in the wild quite a number of times. Ransomware, less so, but malware that scrapes the device for other pieces of data that it can pull, yes. Which is another reason why it's so important to make sure any app that you put on the App Store that's legitimate is secure and operates in a sandbox and doesn't write to local storage and things like that. So yeah, no, but super good question. I hope no one got a good idea out of that question.
Yeah, don't follow Kate's idea. Don't build something. But anyways, anyone else have any questions online or in person? If not, we'd say thank you very much, Brandon. This has been great.
Thanks so much.
And keep in mind, this is our last chapter meeting for the year. We have LastCon next month, so that's really what we do for the chapter. So there are tickets available, lastcon.org. You can get the attendee tickets or training tickets. So hope to see you there. If not, hope to see you in January. Thanks, y'all. Have a good day.